No, we lost Joe. All right, well, let's get started then, and we'll, anybody, if you got questions during any time, please use the Q&A function down at the bottom of the Zoom there, and we'll get any questions you have answered. Same thing goes with anybody out in Facebook land. If you got a question, just type it in the chat in Facebook, and we'll get it answered for you. I don't know, Lance, you want to kind of take us through a St. George 101 bit of history there? You were, it's one of the old guard of craft distillers in America.
Thank you. Yeah, Pat, I definitely would love to. And first I want to start out by saying to everybody, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to come and visit us today virtually. We're very happy to have you all and super happy to be working with Binny's. They've always been so good to us. And I like to think that they've been good to all of Chicagoland as well, because they're supplying you guys with all kinds of good quality booze. And God knows we all need it right now. St. George Spirits, as Pat was kind enough to say, is at the old guard of the craft distilling movement. I'll tell you that when we first started distilling, it wasn't a movement. There was nobody else doing it. When Jorg Rupp, our founder, started making eau de vies out here in California, nobody was crazy enough to start a small distillery because it's a very, very difficult business to crack into. Fortunately, Jorg is all kinds of stubborn, and he stuck with it and was making beautiful eau de vies. Eau de vies are doubly crazy to make because you ask the average man on the street, hey, how do you like eau de vie? They'll look at you and say, eau de what? No idea what he's talking about. Eau de vie is something that we don't usually speak here in America. It was something that a lot of people in Europe would drink after dinner. It's still a strong tradition to do that, but nobody knew what to do with it here. That was 38 years ago. There are no other distilleries that can say that they've been around for 38 years. Shortly after we started, Germain-Robin and Charbet both started up. And then for a long time, that was the only three. And it wasn't until about 20 years ago or so that people really started to more populate the scene with craft distilleries. I showed up here about 25 years ago. I came from a brewing background, and before that, nuclear engineering in the Navy. And when I was brewing, I was having a really great time, and a friend of mine gave me a bottle of Lagavulin. A show of hands, how many people out there like Lagavulin?
Right. Of course.
I can only see 3 of you, so that's I got 100% on that one. It was the first bottle of any sort of spirit that I had ever tried that actually made me think. Before that, it was stuff like Yukon Jack. It was Bacardi 151. These were things that people challenged you to drink at parties. There's a place for both of those. I'm not dissing them right now, but they didn't offer anything for me other than a quick, easy buzz. When I started drinking that Lagavulin, I'm like, wow, there's so much more going on in a spirit than I could have ever imagined. And
have you ever talked to Farber about that? Because do you know that that's how Farber started distilling too?
I didn't. I've spoken with him about a bunch of stuff. That guy used to drive me nuts. I was, oh my God, I don't want to talk to him. Over the years, though, I've just really, really grown to both admire and love the man. He's incredibly talented, and he's incredibly smart.
That's how he stumbled on doing brandy, because he wanted to make single malt because he was in love with single malt. For a lot of the same reasons, was buying Springbank and other things from Headley Wright and Cadenheads, and then decided, wait a second, why would I do this if this is already being done so well in Scotland? I'll do something else and just buy from Scotland. Which is where brandy and Osacalis came from.
That's and I'm thankful every day that Osacalis is making brandy, because they make really, really beautiful products. Again, anybody out there listening who's a Binny's customer, if you haven't tried it, I hope you guys have it at Binny's.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we do.
Go in there and buy some right now, because it'll teach you why you should be drinking brandy. It's really fantastic stuff. Sort of what Dan was going through when he was thinking about making whiskey, why should I do that? And they do it so well in Scotland. We put ourselves through that as well. When I showed up here at St. George Spirits, I wanted to make whiskey. I knew that brewing was halfway to making whiskey, but I also knew that in Scotland, they were very set in their ways. They have strong traditions. Even with those strong traditions, every single distillery was making their own version of a single malt. Everybody had their own expression. And it made me realize that we could have our own expression as well. And that was something that Jorg pushed for. He said, if we're going to make a whiskey, it's got to be something that adds to the conversation instead of repeats something that's already been said. And that has become a mantra for us anytime we enter a category at St. George Spirits. So we, when I first started 25 years ago, we went through eau de vie. It was a very Mr. Miyagi time for me. I show up and I say, I want to make whiskey. And Jorg says, great, go distill those cherries. Go distill those cherries. Go distill those raspberries. It was very wax on, wax off. And by the time, whoa, there goes Dave's computer. By the time we were done with the season, he said, okay, now it's time to start experimenting with some whiskeys. And what I realized from some of the work that I had done at home on a home still, which, by the way, it's against the law, kids. Don't try that at home. But by the time I had finished working through a bunch of the beers that I was making at the brewery that I worked at, I realized that a lot of the flavors that come over and aromas that come over from more heavily roasted grains, they impart a unique character. Nobody was using more heavily roasted grains in Scotland because it diminishes the quantity of the yield. It increases the quality, but all the distillery managers are paid their bonuses based on how many liters of alcohol they can produce for every bushel of grain that they're given. Yep. So the goal for us was to be able to make something that was much more complex right off the still, so that then after barrel aging time, it was going to be even more interesting. So with the unique mash bill that we've got on that, we get lots of chocolate and roasted nut and just really beautiful layered sweet flavors, which is what I'm all about. We didn't use any peat smoke because every time we did, it did tie us into a category with somebody else's spirit. So for the point of differentiation, we wanted to stay away from that. But so we did that. We started growing a little bit more. We got into. I was out on a sales call with some of the salespeople that we work with, and started seeing this proliferation of flavored vodkas, and they were selling like crazy. And every time I tried one, the one thing that I could say across the board was that they were terrible. They were things that led with this chemical aroma that was an approximation of whatever fruit or flavor was on the label, followed by this nasty alcohol heat, and then followed by more chemical aftertaste. And I came back to the distillery and I said to Jorg, this stuff's selling like crazy and it doesn't taste anything like what it's supposed to. We're making it taste just like the fruit that we're distilling it from and nobody wants to buy it. What do? We need to change the language that we're using. Nobody speaks eau de vie, but everybody speaks vodka right now. You got to remember, this is 20 years ago. And that's when we created the brand Hangar One. Hangar One took off for us, propelled us out into a place where more people got to know what St. George was. And then we started growing into other things. We sold the Hangar One brand about 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And when we did that, it enabled us to go into the gins, gave us a lot more room to be able to play. And we grew into the gins, the B&E that Dave's the creator and shepherd of, as well as rum, absinthe. I mean, absinthe came before the Hangar brand was sold, but we've just been blowing up ever since, making lots of stuff. We like to describe ourselves as attention deficit distillers. We love to be able to make more things, and it's really just a way of adding to the conversation and letting you know a little bit more about who we are. So the best way for us to express ourselves. Brett, you got a question forming on your?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think of how we can connect, because I've had the very good fortune to have toured the distillery a couple of times. And the last time we were out there, I think we were out with a couple of friends after an ADI judging, and we were able to go into your lab, which will, if you're a fan of distillation, will make you just lose your mind. So how much of that, so just picture this, a lab loaded with every single isolated botanical fruit, flower, herb, spice in existence on the planet has been somehow distilled by you guys and is sitting in a vial somewhere in your lab. So how much of that, how much of that started with the introduction of Hangar One, it's obviously continued because it exists now well after the brand is sold. How much of that is still being done, and how many of those products see the light of day based on what you actually play with?
All great questions, and let's answer those while we take all of our Benny's friends into the lab through the beauty of portable technology. We're going to walk over there right now so that we can get a view of it.
We're going to switch you up here, boss.
Yep. Thank you. All right, everybody, we're walking over to the lab right now. So while we're walking, Brett, I'll answer your question. So it's a minor fraction of what we do in there that actually sees the light of day as a product. So these are some of the shelves behind me that are lots and lots of things that we've distilled. There are yet more on the shelves on the other side of the room, and there's a whole pallet that's full of boxes of all these wondrous things. We've got our tiny lab stills back behind me. The one that you're seeing right now, that's a 30-liter. That one's a 10-liter.
Now, are those like a scaled down version of what you have out?
Has gone through those stills as a trial run to be able to determine whether or not it's going to work for us. But let's sit down and look at here. To answer your question, it's less than 1% of what we do in here that actually sees the light of day. But that said, everything that we do in here makes us better distillers. It makes us more curious. It keeps us moving. If all you're doing is making one thing all the time, you're not growing. And we want to continue to grow as distillers. A lot of the things that we do push the envelope, and some of them push it way too far. I'm looking at you, Foie Gras Distillate. I'm looking at you, Dave's Oyster Distillate. I'm looking at all the years that I distilled my Christmas tree. But distilling a Christmas tree is something that actually led us to the understanding of how to work with a lot of the ingredients that we forage for the terroir gin. So even though Christmas tree eau de vie is never going to be a thing for us, it's something that taught us to make another product. So
but
everything that's in
that,
here has the purpose. Sorry, I lost you, Brett.
Because that teaches you what happens if I put something highly resinous in the still.
Steve,
what happens if I put something highly acidic in the still, right? I mean, that's what you get out of that from a learning standpoint, is if nothing else, messing around with all these chemicals and compounds and how do they react, right?
Exactly. And just because something's aromatic doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to capture it through distillation. Sometimes it's just infusion.
Right.
Vanilla is a classic one like that. You can't really distill vanilla, which is one of the reasons anytime I see a clear spirit in a clear bottle that's labeled as vanilla, it can't be so. You can't distill vanilla and capture it. And vanilla as an infused flavor, the reason that you see bottles of vanilla extract in brown bottles, dark brown bottles, is because light will completely degrade it. So yeah, we learn a lot in here. We learn what to do and what not to do. And what not to do is very important. And it's very important to learn it at a lab scale instead of learning it at a production scale.
Right.
Lance, how does the still in the lab there compare to the stills outside in the main production area as far as like shape goes and everything? Is it just a scaled down replica, or that's gonna, in theory, kind of affect the spirit in the same way with the percentage of copper contact or anything like that?
Yeah, within reason. I mean, the actual ratio of copper contact, we probably have better copper surface area in the small stills. Mm-hmm. But typically the production stills are going to give us a much better yield, a much better qualitative as well as quantitative yield. So if we like something that's come through the lab still, we're going to love it as it comes through a production still. Certain things like simple fermentations, whether it be a grain fermentation, cane fermentation like rum or any sort of fruit, those scale up directly. And there's no issue there. But with the 30-liter, when we were working with a lot of the different botanicals and learning how those would work for our gins, they don't scale up directly. we came up with our recipes on those, and then took many batches through a large still, just being able to perfect and balance out those recipes. There were probably 6 to 8 on both the terroir and the botanivore that we did on the production stills that weren't right. They were still delicious. There was nothing wrong with them other than the fact that they weren't exactly what we wanted. And we just worked on changing ratios until we got it just where we wanted it for those stills.
Well, terroir was one of the things we wanted to taste here today. And I don't know if some people are tasting at home along with us. And you mentioned it when you brought up the Christmas tree eau de vie.
Yep.
You want to break down kind of what's going on in terroir gin and what makes it so damn cool as a gin?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get on my soapbox for a second too, even though I'm sitting on a bucket, and say that one of the things that I always think that I'm looking at all of you in my bottom right corner, all of you Binny's fans. It's important for you to ask not just how somebody makes something, but why. And because why is so damn important. Thanks, Dave. Dave brought me a glass. The terroir gin, I was out picking my son up from, there you go, thanks, Dave. Picking my son up from day camp one summer. And I was in the hills above Oakland and just fell in love with the way the place smelled. I'm out after work, going to pick up my kid with a bunch of rowdy, screaming kids, and I'm realizing that I'm much more relaxed than I deserve to be. And it's because I'm taking in deep breaths of the forest. And I'm like, man, I would love to capture that aroma in something. And then I realized, oh wait, I'm a distiller. I can do that. And so I thought about it, and I came back and I looked at all this, and I'm like, yeah, no, an eau de vie of the Oakland Hills is just sort of crazy. But I later on, my wife Ellie, who is a big gin swilling fiend, said, you make all these different spirits except the one that I really love. Why don't you make gin? And I started wondering about it, and I said, it's because I don't have a gin. We don't have a gin idea that's different from everything else that adds to the conversation. And that's when I realized that, oh wait, maybe we do. And started thinking about a gin that smells and tastes like the forest. There's nothing I like better than taking a walk out in the woods and being able to reach for a glass of something like this. Even if I'm at home, I can have the woods in my glass. It smells like that. So what you're getting in this, the 3 main ingredients that we're foraging for, actually 4, are Douglas fir, which, by the way, we just ground up 8,000 pounds of Douglas fir today. It's all going into a tank to be infused right now. I harvested several kilos of bay leaves, California bay laurel. Wild fennel goes into this, as well as coastal sage. Those are things that all provide true terroir. They're foraged ingredients that are part of the landscape here. There are a number of things that we do to fill in missing parts of that landscape. One is the inclusion of both orris root and angelica root, which provide this earthy sort of forest floor, decomposing mulch, earthy quality. Cinnamon, which provides a sense of sun-baked trails. We walk roast the coriander that goes into this. Typically we wouldn't do that, but we drive away some of the elements and bring in this very chaparral quality from the coriander on that. For a while we used the wok that I got for my 13th birthday to do that, but we've got to get more woks to that. We doubled our capacity. We bought 2 woks. But
I want to know what kind of 13-year-old gets a wok as a birthday present.
A 13-year-old that doesn't get the food at home that he wants. I learned to cook at home at a pretty early age because my mom hated cooking, and I asked for a wok.
Happy birthday! Make it yourself.
Yeah, there you go. And trust me, I was happy to do it. But then obviously some juniper, and then orange peel and lemon peel for brightness, and that's it. And for me, my favorite serve on this is just a simple, super neat, super clean martini. I've taken to rinsing my glass with the Bruto Americano, which provides an additional bounce of some balsam fir. And that balsam fir provides a little bit more of those foresty aromatics for it, and a slight pink tinge, which is always so welcome. And then a bramble. If you guys haven't had a bramble, I go to sepia and sit at the bar there and ask for a bramble. It's gin and creme de mure and a little bit of lime juice. Sorry, it's lemon juice, shaken and then strained over pebble ice, and it's like the best grown-up snow cone you could ever possibly have. It's so good. Dave and I went to Scotland and England about, what was that, 3 years ago, Dave? 4 years ago? Wow, 5 years ago. And when we were there, we were at this really, really fantastic little bar, Clove Club, and the guys there were making basically a daisy with the terroir gin, and serving that with a fried chicken that they had chopped up pine needles in the batter for the fried chicken, and then they serve it on a bed of pine needles and branches, and it was just like the most amazing experience. So cool.
That's really cool presentation for a cocktail.
Agreed.
What a great gin, though. And I love how you guys have kind of taken these three drastically different gins and just totally ran with them, and they have enough kind of divergent path in them that they have specifically different uses like that, right?
Yeah. Well, and what the process for us is that as we're making the terroir, we're realizing, okay, we've got this. We love this. This is exactly what we wanted it to do. But while we have things that we want to say through gin, the gin also had things that it wanted to say. And there were a lot of ingredients that we tested out that wouldn't necessarily work in the terroir, but they still had a valid reason to exist. And that's where the botanivore was created. And the botanivore was sort of a showcase and a little bit of an orphanage for all those abandoned ingredients. And it was a chance to be able to let them all play together in a really nice way, and the challenge to balance them all out. And then the dry rye, it's really about shifting the base. Because volumetrically, the base is what you've got the most of in any gin. And you can make the biggest sweeping change by doing that. And we used 100% rye base to be able to do that one. And so it's malty and peppery and all kinds of weird, which is super fun. It gives a totally different texture to the gin, totally different texture to something like a Negroni.
Well, and isn't that's a little bit, because rye is used commonly in Europe, right? So there's almost a little bit of an homage to what a potential base grain would have been to a Geneva.
Sure, there's a lot of corn that's used in a Geneva as well, but the end result ends up being very similar, where you've got this very malty taste, and I think that's more processed because on theirs they don't distill that base malt fermentation prior to putting the herbs in it. They actually distill that malt fermentation through all the herbs. So you still have a lot of the malt character very forward in it, which is phenomenal. So it ended up being an homage, sort of incidentally, but again, a lot of fun to make.
This is just kind of this is the tip of the iceberg with all the crazy stuff you guys have made. I mean, you mentioned Bruto Americano, which we love. I did want to get to the green chili vodka at some point today, just because absolutely there's nothing else on the shelf like it.
Yeah, well, and we'll head back into the tasting room for that. But so, yeah, there is nothing else like it, and I want to take a moment to talk about vodka as a dirty word, because when we talked to all of our when we were getting ready to launch vodkas again, all of our friends in the bartending world were like, seriously? I thought you guys were just getting serious about everything, and now you're gonna do vodka again? What's wrong with you? And to teach bad.
a lot. We want to use vodka as an opportunity to express things that can't be expressed through other spirits. And in the case of the green chili vodka, it's that most of the time, vodka producers who are making chili vodkas, pepper vodkas, whatever they want to call them, the only thing that they think should be shown by that vodka is the heat of the pepper. And there's so much more to a pepper. And the best way to experience all those other characteristics is to distill one. Because you can take a habanero and put it into a still, distill it off, you leave the heat behind, and you taste how chocolatey they are. If you bite into one, all you're gonna be doing is screaming and asking for a couple of quarts of milk, because you're not gonna be able to taste it through all that heat. But distillation allows us to separate that in a spectrum and identify the really beautiful, vegetal, sweet, gorgeous characteristics that are there. The sort of impetus behind the green chili was when I was working at a brew pub, the guys in the kitchen would make salsa every day, and they would chop everything up, and then they put it into a colander to be able to let all the excess liquid drip out. Thank you, my lovely assistant, Dave. And I started drinking that stuff as I was walking around the brew pub working, and it was delicious. It was a combination of tomato water, onions, cilantro, peppers, a little bit of garlic, and it was fantastic. And that became sort of the characteristic that we were after in a pepper vodka. And so for this, we distill jalapenos. They're all grown up in Northern California. There's a great farm that we work with. Bring those down here, crush them, infuse them into alcohol for, how long do we do that, Dave? 3 weeks, a month? Yeah. And then that all gets run into the still. We put that into the still, and then we pack the Carter head, the same assembly on the still that we would put certain botanicals for our gin. We pack that with cilantro, and we put lime peel in the still. So you get that bright lime character, you get that fresh herbaceous cilantro, and then we do an infusion once that's off the still, an infusion of habanero, of serranos, and of red and yellow bell peppers. Bell peppers give that vegetal sweetness, a little roundness to it. It's important to have some texture to a decent vodka. And we put a little bit of heat back in, but not so much that this becomes a hazing tool. I don't want this to be the thing that you only pull out when people have stayed too long at a dinner party at your house and you're trying to get rid of them. It's the only time I've ever had Stoli Pepar was when I stayed way too long at somebody's house. If you overstay, you're welcome. You know, because somebody puts a Stoli Pepar on the table. Not
that we like to call out other brands.
We use Malort. Yeah, we use Malort here.
You know what? You'll find me on your floor the next morning if I'm drinking Malort at your house the night before. I actually love Malort. I'm a bit of an oddball, just in that one way. We're
with you on Malort. By the way, we're with you 100%. We are the biggest fans and have done a ton of stuff with Tremaine. He's done a number of variants of it recently. Yeah, we've done a number of variants, but it's interesting that you talk about everything that's used, because I think people think that you're just doing jalapeno when you do this pepper. And if anybody has it at home is trying this, or if you've had it before and you really just pour it neat and try it, you can pick out every single one of the elements you've talked about. You can pick out in isolation on the palate, which is amazing. And it's kind of why I'm glad you went back to the lab, and when you went back to the lab, talked about the different ways to skin the cat in terms of getting flavors to actually work. And you just don't distill everything. You just don't infuse everything. You just, so you just don't add flavors to everything, because it's just not going to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
I went through 15 different peppers.
Yeah. Yeah, look at you scream when you're talking. Okay, yeah, so we went through at least 15 different types of peppers as we were going through this. And it wasn't until I had some cilantro plants on my patio that had bolted. And the seeds are coriander seeds, in case anybody out there doesn't know that. And I'm harvesting these green coriander seeds. And as I'm harvesting them, the smell stayed with me because I'm crushing some of them as I'm doing it. and the smell was amazing. Still on my hands when I got to work, and as we're tasting the green chili vodka, I'm like, holy shit, these are great together. We need to start adding cilantro to these as we're testing this distillate out. And it just, and we were worried because there's that segment of the population that hates cilantro, and it tastes soapy to them. I'm not sure if the component in the cilantro that does that, because there are people who genetically that tastes like soap to them. They've still enjoyed this vodka, and I think that we do destroy that or leave it behind in the still through the process. So,
hey, we got a question. Nice. Crunchy wanted to know if you ever considered Anaheim chilies to give it more of a California flair.
Yeah, we did play around with them, and I love the idea of having the California flair to something. But at the end of the day, I want to be able to make the best possible product. We did a similar thing years and years ago with our eau de vies. For the longest time, we wanted to be all California fruit in the eau de vies that we're making. But we found that the raspberries that came from California, they just didn't cut it. I mean, they're good to eat. They're good to make pies with, that sort of thing. But when you're making an eau de vie, you need more than that. And so we had to go farther north until we got to the northern border of Washington State. The pears that we get now, the best ones that we get, end up coming from Colorado. They're really fantastic. But the blend of peppers that we landed on because of the fact that they gave us the best picture, at least the one that we thought was the best.
This, I will say about this is the most full-bodied vodka I think I've ever had. This is a vodka with the weight of a whiskey to it.
Thank you, and we can thank the bell peppers for that. And so I would recommend trying this first in a mule, because it's such a simple thing. And what a really good ginger beer is going to replace the heat from the peppers with that ginger spice. Not the one from the Spice Girls, but equally good. You get that. But what's great about it is spice from a pepper coming from that capsaicin, it lingers on your palate and builds. Whereas from ginger, it's there and then it's gone, and you can go back in. And it's a very refreshing, nice, spicy drink. You can mix it with any sort of agua fresca, whether it's strawberry, watermelon, any sort of melon, or if you juiced a bunch of cucumbers, you could do cucumbers. The very obvious thing for us, and the thing that was the test for Dave and I when we first put this together, was a very scientific Bloody Mary, where we put together a big enough mix to make 2 Bloody Marys, split it very equally, weighed out the ice, and then poured I don't think it was even our straight vodka. I think we used a different vodka because I didn't like our straight vodka in there at the time because it was too mellow. We used Stoli because it had more of a bite. And yes, thank you, Crunchy. I agree. Agua Fresca, way to go. But as a Bloody Mary, man, it just excels. It elevates all the other ingredients. It doesn't make it crazy spicy. If you want a crazy spicy one, you can always add something to it. But it makes it meatier. And for me, a Bloody Mary is a meal replacement plan, and I want my Bloody Mary to be meatier. So this was something that we designed to do that. And I think Pat, the weight on the palate that you're describing, as well as there's a great burst of umami that comes through and elevates the tomatoes and the tomato juice.
Interesting. It's good because I think a lot of people see a product like a chili vodka and just assume like, oh, cool, it's for Bloody Marys. Like, what the hell else am I going to do with that? But you've given us a lot of different ideas. The agua fresca thing I'd like to try because that just seems like a match made in heaven.
It's super refreshing. It's really delicious. Dave, what's the oddest thing that you've seen that's worked with the green chili?
The oddest thing probably is green chartreuse. Green chartreuse.
Really?
Green chartreuse and the green chili are kind of you think about like a last word with some lime and like a Luxardo and scratch the gin for the green chili. On paper it shouldn't work, much like the last word cocktail in general. And when you actually have it, it's beautiful. Green chili really shows well with it. It's kind of amazing. I think to your point, just on the sense of the full body that's there, the green chili vodka is a complete picture of a pepper unto itself. It's got a lot to contribute It's a blood, that Bloody Mary test. We did that blind when we actually tasted the Bloody Marys to see if we could tell where the green chili is, because you have so many other distractions in that sort of cocktail. Green chili shows. It's got a thumbprint. It leaves a mark. Love it or hate it, it's going to be there. And that's kind of one of our sort of ultimate tests here, is to have something that's really unique. And then also, it's got to be expressive when used in a cocktail. It's got to actually have a statement to make, so that you should either love it or you should hate it. We don't want indifference, though.
I think it's balanced and layered enough, though, that it's not going to totally dominate everything it touches, though, either. Which is so rare for a flavor like this. Isn't, when you see green chili, you don't expect a subtle flavor, and it's not subtle, but it's layered and nuanced, though. It's fancy.
and that's probably one of the hardest things for us, is being able to communicate to people that they need to put their preconceptions about a chili vodka aside and just give it a taste. So that's so vitally important.
So Brett, I think, had in the realm of odd experiments you guys are doing, he had heard about a Soju distillate that you were making, and I think we wanted to hear a little bit more about that, because that sounds pretty cool, and that's certainly a growing category.
Yeah, and we have it on the shelves now.
Congratulations, and thank you. Oftentimes we're inspired by ingredients, but white rice is not a huge inspiration. As a matter of fact, it's sort of an analog for being boring. And so it wasn't something that we dove into because we were in love with white rice. I know it's a staple around the world in many people's diets, and I salute it for that. But it came to us because of the fact that we had some friends that opened a restaurant in Berkeley. There was a little ramen shop, imaginatively named Ramen Shop, and they were doing such amazing work that we wanted to be able to do something that contributed to what they were doing. And what they were doing was taking these venerated old Japanese traditions in the culinary world and putting their own spin from Japanese on that. So different sourcing of ingredients. They were using ingredients that were not traditional, but that worked. And we wanted to make a California shochu. And so it's all California grown Cal Rose rice, and that's got to be steamed and then inoculated with koji, which is a type of fungus. That fungus spreads its mycelium into the cooked rice. What it's doing is it's going to try and use that rice as food. And to do that, it secretes enzymes that break down the starches in the rice into simple sugars, which is what we need as fermenters and distillers to be able to ferment and distill this stuff. So once that mycelium is spread through there, and just before all this stuff starts to spore, that gets gathered up, put into water with yeast, slowly ferments. It's fermenting as the enzymes are breaking down more starches into simple sugars, and then once that's completed, we distill it. It smells like a very concentrated version of a sake, which these guys at Ramen Shop use it to make highballs. But one of the things that I've really fallen in love with doing is mixing it with rice milk and just like a bar spoonful of Pero de Vie and shaking that, straining it, and it's like a Nigori sake. It's got that same viscous mouthfeel as a Nigori sake, and you pick up all the sake flavors from diluting down the shochu, and oftentimes you'll either get melon or pear out of some sakes through their fermentations. That little bit of pear, not enough to make it scream pear, just enough to give it a little bit of a fruity edge. It's a lot of fun. We've played around with that one for, we've done some interesting cedar aging for some of those just to see what it would do. But more importantly, and one that's going to allow us to transition to another product here, is that when we started making the shochu, we had the opportunity to get some Ume Fruit. If you're not familiar with Ume Fruit, you're not alone. I've been unfamiliar with it for a long time, but Ume is a fruit that it's a stone fruit traditionally grown in Japan. A lot of people call it a Japanese plum, but it's really closer to an apricot. It's bright, it's acidic, it's aromatic, and traditionally in Japan they make something called umeshu, And umeshu, you infuse those ume fruit into shochu with rock sugar and leave that for a period of about 6 months. As it sits there, the rock sugar slowly dissolves, and the slow dissolution of the rock sugar allows the high proof of the shochu to penetrate into the stone of the fruit, liberating that great almond character. So you get some nuttiness, you get some sweetness, and you get some bright acidity from the fruit. And it makes this really, really delicious liqueur. When we were first putting together our Baller single malt whiskey, we were ready to bottle it up. We thought it was delicious. We thought it was all ready to go. And I came in a couple of days before we were supposed to start bottling it and poured some umeshu into a glass and rinsed it, emptied it out, and then poured Baller into that glass.
Just like this one.
Just like this glass. And and as soon as I did that, I smelled it and go, God, that's what we have to do. That's what the Baller has to be. And I put it under Dave's nose. And Dave, what was the first thing that you said to me?
I forget exactly. I think it was something along the lines of "fuck you."
Don't put that in my face.
It was really more because he realized that this is the way that we had to do it, and it meant that we wouldn't be able to bottle the Baller for another year and a half.
Once the idea was out there, it was too right. It's too perfect. But I want you to understand that we had bottles already purchased,
labels,
the container. We had labels already done, printed. It was the quick thought in my head was, "Fuck you." The warehouse team is going to be really angry with us.
Our CPAs
are going to be super.
Yeah, I was going to say the accountants are definitely going to be the most angry at that point.
And there's no this pushes the and Lance's very succinct argument said, "Boss, this is going to push the project back by best case scenario. We get Ume next month, infusions, barrel aging, then finishing whiskey, 14, maybe 18 months." And Lance's response was,
"It's the right way to do it."
Nope.
No. What was my response?
Baller.
There it is. Baller. Yeah. If you're going to call it Baller, it's got to be Baller all the way. But so this whiskey was, again, it was inspired by our friends at the ramen shop. Dave and I would go in there and have these really big, beautiful bowls of tonkatsu ramen. And the tonkatsu broth is almost like, it's like a pork milkshake. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't care who says that there is something wrong with that. It's just like, it's warm, it's rich, it's so incredible. And you need a highball to cut through that. And your highball needs to be tight. It needs to be just right to be able to do this. And it's got to come through as mostly dry. And our regular single malt wouldn't do that. It's really more of a dessert whiskey, whereas the Japanese whiskeys, like we're sitting there having hibiki highballs, which, by the way, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. Those are fantastic. But these are our friends, and we wanted to be able to be the whiskey in their highballs. And so we went through a lot of the barrels that we had experimental whiskeys, and we had some that were a lot leaner in their profile than our lot series single malt. And as we did that, we found one that was a very simple profile. It was pale malt and a little bit of Munich malt. The Munich malt bumps up the toast level just a bit to give you a little bit more maltiness. And then after distillation, we treat that with maple hardwood charcoal, not to be able to remove anything from the whiskey, but to be able to pick up the smokiness from that charcoal. And it's a really, really bright, focused smokiness.
It's in there. It's really cool.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And then after that, so it's 2.5 months in bourbon cask, and then 6 months in umeshu cask, and it comes out like
years. No months.
So, sorry, did I say 2.5 months? Sorry, 2.5 years in bourbon cask, 6 months in umeshu cask.
Gorgeous.
Thank you. Yeah, I absolutely adore that one. And
that
it's
dark fruit smoke combination in there is it's wonderful. And the smoke is so barely there, but it's there front to back though. It's not just one thing in the very finish or something. It's there, but it's just, dialed down.
Dressing.
Yeah, and it really delivers in a highball. It's It's also fantastic in a Boulevardier.
I could definitely see that. That's cool.
Test that out
Another
someday.
cocktail that doesn't get enough attention.
Yeah.
Well, we round out and hold up to the anise and the licorice too, because
Yeah.
again, it's another one that's layered where there's a whole bunch of different things going on, and it's either going to play with or play up other flavors. And I could see this obviously working with fennel anise, that sort of fennel anise, licorice root, that sort of thing.
Man, that's good.
Finish is really nice. Just keeps going.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the friend that owns the ramen shop, he got married several years back in Maine, and we brought a bunch of this out to the wedding. And it's central Maine, beautiful place on a lake, little town called Center Level. And the lakes there are clean, clear, and warm. And after the wedding ceremony, everybody went out into the middle of the lake with bottles of Baller. And what's that?
And not much else.
And not much else, yeah. There was a lot of nudity and a lot of drinking, and that is not my kid. It was a really, really good time.
Sounds like
pretty
a hell of a wedding. Just nudity and drinking.
It was easily in the top 5 weddings that I've ever been to, and I've been married 3 times, so
You're experienced in weddings.
I am. I got it down. So.
Hey, we did get a request here from Crunchy if the sake precursor to the soju is something you would consider bottling at some point.
We don't have the license for that. As distillers, we can only do spirits, so liqueurs and hard spirits. That's all we can do. So it's like,
sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, the beauty of it is we don't have to filter any of that stuff to distill it. Pressing all the sake off to filter it is sort of a pain as well. But I'd love to be able to bottle up the beer that goes into our whiskey, but it's another thing that we can't do. So.
What kind of fermenter is that koji rice fermentation? Is that open or closed? I mean, how do you monitor that mold growth and conversion?
That takes place in open trays.
Okay.
So, but then the fermentation process is in a closed stainless steel vessel.
Okay, cool.
Temperature controlled.
I guess you have to probably watch that sporing pretty closely, right? Because if it spores, then you lose the whole batch then, right?
You wouldn't lose the whole batch. It's going to change it, but hopefully you do enough of them that you can catch it. Everything evens out. Excuse me.
Well, cool.
Dave answered a question. Wow, that was great. All right, where do you want to go next?
Well, we got another whiskey to talk about, I suppose. That's a little more of the traditional American in style, at least.
I want to let Dave take over on this, but
Dave's baby.
I'm on a roll, so I'll set this one up. I'll tee it up, and then you can whack it. So when Dave first showed up at the distillery, he would sit in on the tastings that Jorg and I would do on the single malt, selecting barrels to go into a bottling, and Dave would nose alongside and taste as well, and he asked to be able to take a crack at one point at putting a blend together. And both Jorg and I realized very quickly that Dave was much better at blending than he and I were. And so we let him take over the blending of the single malt. And I should be careful using the term blending because it's not a blend. It is a single malt. And it's just selecting different barrels from our barrel stocks to be able to go into it. But it took a quantum leap forward when Dave took the program over. There was one point about 10 years ago when we were saying to ourselves, I wonder what you could do if you had even more barrels available to select from. What kind of whiskey could you do? And about 2 weeks later, we found ourselves in Kentucky and going around tasting through various rickhouses. And we found some that would sell us some product, and we bought a bunch from them. And about 3 weeks later, we had 400 barrels of whiskey. 400 barrels of whiskey sitting on our doorstep. And Dave set about to cataloging all those and figuring out what sort of groups those would fit in. and then blended those together, and the Breaking and Entering project was born. As everything has evolved and changed, this has grown into not being just a selection of bourbons, which it was initially, but into something that's much bigger and much more interesting from our perspective, and that is a blend of multiple styles of American whiskey. So this is bourbon from both Kentucky and Tennessee, it's rye from Tennessee, and it's single malt from St. George Spirits, all blended together. You can tell everybody in the audience, Dave, what all those things bring to the picture in the B&E American.
Yeah, I think and Lance is very, very kind, but I mean,
Not usually.
not usually. But I just keep it all in perspective. I mean, Lance said about making single malt whiskey here almost 25 years ago. It's what inspired him to become a distiller in the first place, as he was talking about Lagavulin earlier, just coming from a brewer's background. And so the malt whiskey program here really, it's kind of thing where Lance is very kind to give me a compliment on this. The best compliment I've ever received in my entire life is, I think it was lot 9, maybe lot 9. And I brought you a blend, and your statement was, "I have nothing to add to this." Effectively, it was exactly what Lance and York would have done together.
If we could have.
Could have. And you were. Point of that is to describe that, and part of what York set in motion here with helping Lance not just learn about whiskey, but to learn about Kirsch, to learn about pear brandy, to learn about raspberry brandy, Krauthausen, to play with these different concepts. But he taught Lance to love distillation. He taught Lance to love creativity. And it's part of the ethos that drives every one of these products we've enjoyed here today, is where B&E kind of picks up on that and carries it forward. Because ultimately, it's about having a unique thumbprint. I mean, you all know that there's a lot of whiskeys out there, and there's a lot of barrel finishes, and there's a lot of beautiful work. It's really interesting and fascinating. What this became an opportunity to do, though, was to create a whiskey that was singularly unique as an American whiskey, because it's almost more like an American answer to blended Scotch. It's trying to borrow on different whiskey types and to have a bourbon. When you get down to it, what is a bourbon? It's a legal classification. It basically involves the mash bill, the barrel age, and the type of barrel used and all that. For a rye whiskey. A rye whiskey versus, that's defined by rye being an American rye or a Canadian rye. They're two different things, and most folks won't really recognize that. Ultimately, we wanted to chase down an idea of something that's really genuinely unique and expressive, and could showcase part of our favorite parts of our whiskey program that goes back nearly 25 years, and to build on that base, that's sort of, some of those sweeter, darker bourbon tones, some of those nice malty, spicy rye tones. Play with that. So we created this whiskey that would be a 4-grain whiskey. So corn, rye, barley, and wheat, but it's going to have no singular component that's greater than 51%. So when you actually get down to the mash bill, it's not technically classified as anything. And it's sort of what's so much fun about this is it allows us to operate outside of some of those normal guidelines. What a bourbon or rye, an American rye would have to be, what a malt whiskey has to be.
Yeah, and to sort of piggyback on that, categories are great because of the fact that for a consumer, you know exactly what it is you're getting, right? But the other side of it is that categories can stifle creativity.
Yep.
If you are pigeonholed into saying, this is the mash bill that I have to have, you can't go outside of that box. It's much, much harder to become creative. But if you create your own idea for what it should be, the sky's the limit. And that's exactly what Dave did with the B&E American. And I think to a certain degree, we were given confidence about that by people like John Glaser, who John is somebody who's constantly reinventing what takes place with Scotch whiskeys. And he's a champion for everything that whiskey can be. And whiskey can't be everything that it can be without breaking a few rules. And we love breaking a few rules.
Right.
Pretty good.
Well, that's the whole argument behind the current, and I don't know where you guys stand or how much you're involved with the American single malt movement, trying to codify. And again, is it the parts of it where it codifies some level of quality control is good, but and I've
the original meeting for that whole thing was actually in the tasting room at the back of our Lincoln Park location.
Wow.
After that's where Matt and Colin and those guys got together for the first time 7-8 years ago. And I have been a supporter of the concept of the rules as they pertain to quality control, but if you're going to have the word American involved in there, then it needs to be American, which is we will take everything and do something with it and try to make it better, is sort of the concept behind a lot of because look, nothing American is really American because nobody from America except for indigenous people are really American, truly. The rest of us have only been hanging around for the last 300 or 400 years at most. So yep. What makes American single malt? And then you hit on it exactly that. You gotta poke the walls a little bit and punch a little bit to come up with something that's excellent. That, I mean, how many different American whiskey rules are potentially violated? Certainly you could, there's nothing in the CFR that you could call this except for American whiskey, right? Is this even codified as whiskey or is this a DSS?
It's a whiskey.
Okay.
It counts as a whiskey, but it's at the most basic category of whiskey. I mean, we could call it a blended whiskey. And it's one where, just as a concept,
right.
I think we almost have a hesitancy to describe something as a blended whiskey because there's a sense of it being lesser.
Yeah.
And I think for those who are maybe a little more educated in this, you know, they've enjoyed more whiskeys, they're more excited by it. They've spent some time with the whiskey world. To reference people like John Glazer and Compass Box's work. Actually, blended whiskey, I'm excited by it because it's an opportunity to create something greater than the sum of its parts. It's an opportunity to live outside of those boundaries. And then it comes down to what the ethos is. It comes down to a question of what's the intentionality of the distillery, of the blending there. Is it to make a blended whiskey that's essentially hitting a price point? Is it to make a blended whiskey that's actually has something unique to contribute to that dialogue in the world?
But Brett, I'm with you all the way. It's got to be about quality control. There are a lot of ways that even inside the rules that they're putting forward, you could still make a really crappy whiskey. And if the whole idea is to put this title on it that's helping and hoping to guarantee some form of quality, it hasn't done it. And I support their work. I haven't signed on at this point. I support the idea behind what they're doing, but I also feel that the whole idea, not just of being Americans, but more closely being American craft distillers, is to be pioneering. It's to do the things that the big companies are too afraid and too cantankerous to do. They tend to bring in focus groups to determine what new product they're going to make instead of listening to their own artistry. They've become such slaves to an industrial process that they don't know how to create anymore. They know how to make a process more efficient, and there's value to that. That's really fantastic. But you need to let an artist be an artist first, and then you can figure out how to mass produce their art and make it accessible to more people. And I think our job is to be the artist at the beginning of that whole process.
Just to take that entire concept back for a minute, because it's relevant to the terroir gin. When we were doing the terroir gin a decade plus, it was Lance and his wife, my wife and I, going out into the hills and starting to forage Doug fir and coming back with backpacks of Doug fir, and it was measuring out, having a beautiful 3-hour hike, a couple of backpacks of Douglas fir, and coming back and saying, I've got 8 pounds of Doug fir. We got to go back out next weekend. And it was this sort of process of scaling that up and trying to recognize how do you do the exact same thing with the exact same intentionality, but scale that up so it's something that we can really make a statement with. Yesterday, our Douglas fir run, we brought back about 8,000 pounds of Doug fir foraged on private land, and it was all basically saplings and low-hanging branches that we were able to harvest as a fire break, as a way to help manage that land more efficiently. So it's the kind of thing of like, it's still going to be Doug fir. There's still the exact same process at its basis that we need to do where we harvest this.
Yeah, at overriding, I mean, you would hope the category, I guess you guys have to, it's funny, to make something that is extremely creative and extremely high quality, it's counterintuitive that you have to go to the depths of the bureaucratic regulation to make something at the top of creativity. And I guess it's nice. It would be nice if somehow if it would be linear, where the qualifications of quality purported quality follow the level of creativity instead of the opposite.
Totally agreed.
Our in-house compliance officer who helps whip up with all those matters is about equal. She's amazing. She does an extraordinary job.
She's not watching,
but she spends about half of her time just furious with us because she's got to sort of refigure out the category or what the definitions are.
You can't do this. Well, we did.
Oh my.
Well, I think you really nailed it with this break with the B&E here. It's you're not beholden perception-wise to what people would think. Oh, it's a bourbon, therefore it should taste like A, B, and C. But it still is familiar to A, B, and C. And it throws in a little bit of these other things too. And I think you've made this really just wonderfully layered blend that's full of flavor and isn't, and like you had alluded to earlier, calling it American with a blended whiskey kind of implies, the old stuff you'd find in your grandparents' house. And this is not that. This is anything but.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant piece of work.
Yeah, very enjoyable. It was nice.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for joining us. I don't want to take up too much of everybody else's time here on a Friday. I mean, obviously we could talk geeky distillation things for hours, but between you and Brett here, I think we have several decades of content potentially.
There's
Thanks
very
for
little
joining
doubt
us.
of
I mean, we got to get you back to talk about more weird, unique distillations, I think, at some point in the future.
And by the way, Lance, thank you for the tip on the Friday Wall Street Journal crossword puzzle.
You're very welcome.
So,
how are you enjoying those?
We had somebody in my building has abandoned their Wall Street Journal subscription, and probably regarding the journalism, but I'm more than happy to take that and steal the crossword puzzle.
He's stealing somebody's newspaper is what he's trying to say.
Exactly.
Yeah, very nice. Very, very nice.
They never pick up the newspaper at 5 a.m. I don't think
Way
they
to
want
be neighborly in
What's
a
wrong with
pandemic, Brett.
Let me know if you have any leads on this week's, because I don't even know where to start figuring out the meta on that one.
I haven't. We were traveling. I haven't even looked at it.
Gotcha.
Haven't even
Well, if
looked
it comes
at
up, give me a shout.
All right.
Well, thanks again, guys. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be back next Wednesday. What do we got next Wednesday? Oh, with Leslie Gracie, Master Distiller of Hendrick's Gin next Wednesday. We're going to be talking a different side of the gin spectrum with her. And you get to see their cool new distillery too, which is apparently the Disneyland of gin distilleries. So, Dave and Lance, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you
really
very
appreciate
much.
all this wonderful.
Thank you, guys.
That we're always getting.
Everybody, thanks everybody in Chicagoland for joining.
All right.
All right, everybody, have a good weekend. We'll
Great
see you next
to see
week.
you.
Cheers.
See you, Lance. See you, Dave.
Take care.
Bye.
Guys.
Thank you.
Bye.